defendant is a member of the Compton Barrio 70, CV70, street gang. On October 5, 2005, CV70 gang leader David Guerrero ordered several gang members driving in two cars to commit 3 shootings as part of a long-standing conflict between CV70 and Pyro, a rival gang. Following Guerrero's instructions, defendant drove several fellow CV70 members to a gas station, where 2 individuals exited his car and shot Charles Smith and Jasmine McKinney with 2 handguns and an AK-47 assault rifle. Both victims survived. Defendant then drove to Gibson Street, where someone in the car leaned out the front passenger window and shot at a house with the AK-47. Finally, he drove to a parked car containing Duane Ferguson and Melvin Walker, members of the Lueders Park Bayou Street gang, a CV70 rival. Someone from his vehicle shot the Bayou members with the AK-47. Ferguson survived but Walker was killed. 7 months later, on May 12, 2006, defendant was interrogated about the October 5 shootings. At the beginning of the interrogation, detectives asked him, "We advised you of your rights, is that correct?" "We advised you of your rights, your Miranda rights." Defendant replied, "Yes, sir." Defendant denied being a CV70 member or knowing any members except for David Guerrero and Joe Toledo, each of whom he had seen only once. He denied having ever been at the scene of any shooting and denied knowing whether CV70 members referred to him by the gang moniker Nappy. When asked whether he knew Danny Guerrero, David's brother, he admitted he had seen Danny a couple of times and that he had been to his house to play Xbox 2, or 3 times at the most, for like an hour at most. Defendant stated he could not remember what street the Guerrero house was on, when he had last played Xbox there, whether anyone from the house had ever driven his car when he played Xbox, or whether anyone had ever asked to drive his car. On March 1, 2007, detectives interrogated defendant a second time. At the beginning of the interrogation, police advised defendant of his Miranda rights as follows: "Before we get started, I'm going to again, so it's on the tape. Advise you of your rights again. We'll go over that again here. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to an attorney before we talk to you and have them present while we talk to you. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney, one will be appointed to represent you free of charge." Okay, understanding that, those rights, we want to talk to you about one day in particular and then possibly some other things, but especially, regarding October 5 of 2005. Do you have a problem, with us talking to us about things we want to ask you? Italics added, when defendant failed to answer the question clearly, the officer said, "Are you willing to, again, based on the agreement we have, are you willing to cooperate with us and tell us what you know about the October 5, 2005, yes or no?" Defendant replied, "Yes." During the second interrogation, defendant stated he had nothing to do with CV70 but admitted CV70 members called him Nappy, a name given to him by some guy, a non-CV70 member, who he hardly knew and had not seen for a long time. He knew Danny Guerrero, as they played Xbox together, including on October 5, 2005, the day of the shooting. On that day, other people arrived at the house after he did, but he could not remember their names. He did not associate with those people, but merely played Xbox with Danny Guerrero. He was nevertheless ordered by a CV70 member whose name he did not know but whom he identified from a photograph as Jose and Cisco, to go for a ride, with defendant driving his own car. Defendant left the house in his Honda with 2 passengers whose names he did not know, one in the front seat beside him and one in back. He later identified the one in back as CV70 member David Covarrubias. He could not describe the front passenger, even as to his ethnicity or age, and never spoke to him. During the drive, defendant was directed by someone on the phone. He at first denied knowing who directed him by phone, saying it could have been anybody, but eventually admitted it was David Guerrero. David Guerrero informed defendant he, David, was following in a car with other CV70 members, and instructed him to pull over to a gas station. When defendant stopped at the gas station, his passengers got out and he shortly thereafter heard some gunshots. He did not see where the passengers were shooting because, he stated, he was actually focused on, on what was going on. I just, kind of like turned back, and when I turned back they were already getting inside the car. So at that point I was thinking, I should drive away or whatever. I don't know, it was just too much stuff that was coming through my mind. Guerrero then told defendant to drive to a specific house and stop. When he did so, his passengers half-exited the car and shot at the house, after which defendant drove them back to the Guerrero house. Once there, he transferred to an SUV, accompanied by Alejandro Perez, who now had the AK rifle, and was directed by David Guerrero to drive to a specified location. When he arrived, Perez shot Ferguson and Walker from defendant's car. Throughout the interrogation, defendant minimized his role in the shootings. He claimed he had gone to the Guerrero house only to play Xbox with Danny Guerrero. It was later revealed that Danny Guerrero was incarcerated in San Bernardino at the time of the shootings, and repeatedly stated he had not wanted to drive with CV70 members but was forced to at gunpoint. Defendant claimed not to have seen any gun until he was already on the road and not to have seen any of the shootings, even those committed by his passengers from his vehicle, but merely heard shots. He was unable to identify either the passenger who sat in the front seat during the first drive or any type of gun used in the shootings, claiming he could not distinguish between a revolver or semi-automatic handgun because he said he did not know about those revolvers, and could not tell if the passenger's gun was a pistol or rifle because the passenger had it under his sweater or something. Defendant later admitted the front seat passengers on both drives used an AK rifle. In his opening statement, the prosecutor, over defendant's objections, told the jury that CV70 had been involved in a gang war since 1998 with several Piru Street gangs, one of which was Lueders Park. The war began when a CV70 member shot a Lueders Park member in the eponymous Lueders Park. The prosecutor reviewed some dozen retaliatory shootings that occurred over the ensuing years, leaving gang members on both sides and their relatives dead, including Miss Ricky Jimenez and Horace Ferguson, an 8-year-old boy. The prosecutor told the jury, "The individuals in this gang I am talking about are these gentlemen right here," referring to defendant and Toledo, his co-defendant. Duane Ferguson, one of the 3 surviving victims in this case, testified regarding the CV70/Lueders Park feud. He said his family's house had been shot up 3 times, and 3 of his cousins and 2 friends had been killed and his brother injured in feud-related shootings over the years. Corey Ferguson, an associate of Lueders Park, testified over defendant's objection that he witnessed the murder of 8-year-old Horace Ferguson by a CV70 member in 2003. Detective Peter Hecht, the People's Gang expert, discussed the several incidents of CV70 gang violence previously introduced by the prosecutor. He testified that in 1998, Manuel Castillo, a CV70 member, shot Paul Spencer, a Lueders Park member, in Lueders Park. Lavelle McCleary, a Piru member, then shot Castillo in the face. Castillo killed McCleary a few weeks later. Members of Piru then killed Castillo's father and wounded his uncle. Later, Miss Jimenez was murdered by 2 black males while she was standing outside a car talking to CV70 leader Guerrero. It was suspected in the community that Guerrero was the intended target of the shooting and that the murder was committed by members of the Ferguson family, several of whom belonged to Lueders Park. Jimenez's brother retaliated by shooting Brandon Buchalter, a Lueders Park associate, in 2003. CV70 members then shot and killed Creshawn Irving, a Piru member, 2 men named Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson, and Darrell White, a member of the Ferguson family. and conspired to kill a Mr. Patino and a Mr. Laura in 2005.